Good evening. I am here tonight to speak to you about the South Sudan School of Preaching. And if you got the handout this morning, there was a little article about my recent trip to South Sudan, which spurred a lot of questions from people. One, why were you in South Sudan? Two, when did you start working with South Sudan? And three, why are you working with South Sudan? So I'm going to attempt to answer all those questions and many more tonight. So to begin, before I get too much into my trip and the details of what I was doing, I've kind of got to give a little bit of backstory to answer some of those questions. And so hopefully my PowerPoints will be able to be seen. That's starting off right off the bat, that's a little bit small. So hopefully going forward, it'll get better. This is the newest mission work here at North MacArthur. It hasn't really been made public often or yet. This is kind of its introduction to the congregation. So I hope I do a good job of kind of presenting to you what we're doing in South Sudan. To start off, many years now, me and Vanessa have talked about wanting to do more mission work, wanting to do something in the future that revolves more around ministry, around helping others, whether it be in the mission field or working with different organizations here in the United States. We have had many opportunities to do so in the recent years. However, it never has seemed to work out, whether it be timing, whether it be our life situation. It seems the doors, every time we try to open a door to a new opportunity, those doors have been shut pretty quick. Leading us to just kind of think, okay, sometime in the future we'll do something. At the beginning of this year, I kind of got tired of saying sometime in the future and decided maybe I just need to stop making my plans of what I'm going to be doing and let God show me a plan to be doing now. And so I began this year with a new mindset of I'm going to open up to God and just let Him work, show me what work needs to be done. So I started off every morning reading an Old Testament scripture, a New Testament scripture, spending time in prayer, spending every day kind of starting off, focusing on God, getting my mindset around His ways. And that's where I came across Isaiah 55, which we just read. A verse that kind of came across early on this year when going through this. The idea of my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. This is kind of the mindset I adopted. Maybe stop pursuing my plans and my goals and see what God has in store. What different plans does God have? So this kind of became a verse that I kept coming back to throughout the year. And so as the year continued on, sometime about July, I ran into Tyler outside the auditorium after services, and he just said, hey, I'm going to be playing golf this week with my father-in-law. You should join us. Seemed easy enough. I like playing golf, so I took him up on the offer. And as things do, when you meet somebody new, one of the things that they usually start off with is, what do you do for a living? It's a question I've learned to hate. I don't blame anybody for ever asking that question because it is a good conversation starter. It is a good way to relate to somebody. But when you do something you aren't excited about, it's not fun to talk about. When you have a job that you have to explain, because you can't just say, oh, I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor. Those are easy to say, but when you do a job that you have to explain to people, you get annoyed with, okay, here's what I do, here's what it is, and you go through the whole song and dance that you've done many times. So as it goes, Wes, Tyler's father-in-law, asked me, so what do you do? And I begin, okay, well, here's what it is. And I get about halfway through my normal description of what I do, and I just stop and I say, you know what? I don't like it. I don't want to talk about it. I hope I'm not being rude, but I just don't want to talk about what I do. And he said, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, I am wanting to start doing something different. I would like to pursue something, whether it's full-time, part-time, I want to do something in ministry. And his eyes lit up. And by the time we were done playing golf, he had already convinced me to travel to Colorado to find out more about Bear Valley's International Schools of Preaching. I always try to assume people know what different things I'm talking about are. Most of us are familiar with Bear Valley and the Bible school up in Colorado. But if you aren't, Bear Valley is a Bible school up in Colorado that trains preachers. This congregation has sent many young men, especially in recent years, up there to train and to learn how to preach. It's something our congregation has a good partnership with, we're very familiar with. We know a lot of the same people up there. Many of our ministers have spent time up there. So I was very familiar with the Bear Valley School of Preaching, but what I was not aware of is that there is an international side of the Bear Valley School of Preaching. There is schools around the world in different countries that are set up to train preachers. This is probably an area of Bear Valley that a lot of us aren't very familiar with. The reason they started doing this is they were bringing in people from other countries to try to train them to be preachers so they can go back to their countries and train people. But what they found is many people that came to the United States did not want to return home. They got too comfortable here. They did not want to go back to living the way they were living before. And so it became a problem. Their goal to train preachers for going back to their country and being missionaries in their home countries was not working. So they said, we need to do something different. So they started working with congregations in many other countries, developing and starting schools in each country. So today, they have over 80 schools in 27 different countries. They have schools in Asia, Central and South America, West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, and Europe. So here are the 27 countries. It's a little small, but there's 27 countries there, and in those 27 countries, there are 80 schools. Two of the countries that have the most schools are India and, kind of to my surprise, Nigeria. If you pay attention to anything in the news, schools growing in Nigeria, it would kind of come to a shock because there's a lot of persecution there. Most of their schools are in the southern part of Nigeria where it's safer, but they actually do have some that are wanting to start up in the northern part, and that is where they're having the most success growing these schools. Each school is set up with a staff locally. They have an in-country director, so they have somebody overseeing the day-to-day operations of the school, and each school has a stateside coordinator. And that is what I have accepted the position of. I am the stateside coordinator of one of these schools, the school in South Sudan. As a stateside coordinator, I'm responsible for overseeing the school, overseeing the budget, auditing the budget as things go throughout the year, solving any problems that come up, and visiting the school at least once a year. Preferably twice a year, but due to safety concerns, it may not always be able to be twice a year. And while in the country visiting, I'll be teaching classes. So those are the different roles and how these schools are set up. So that's what I went up to Colorado, is to learn more about these schools. They have once a year, all the coordinators of these schools get together. They have a little retreat in Colorado. They share with one another issues they've seen, different things that their school has accomplished over the year, and maybe different updates of what's going on with their individual schools. So that's what I went up to find more about, and obviously since I'm up here telling you about being a coordinator for South Sudan, I liked what I heard and decided this is what I'm going to be doing. While I was in Colorado, we'd spend most days hearing about different programs, but that night we would have a devotional. And one of the nights, the devotional was over Isaiah 55. And I thought, that's kind of neat. I've been, looking at Isaiah 55 a lot this year, and now here we're having a little devotional over it. But the part I always focused on Isaiah 55, I always stopped at your thoughts are not my thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. That's kind of where I had stopped with that verse. That's the part that stuck out to me. But when we were up there, the more the focus was on verses 10 and 11. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, Giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose. This is a reminder of how the power of God's word. It says here, God's word is going to go out. It's going to accomplish its job. God has a plan, and his plan is going to be accomplished. It's just a question of whether we are going to participate in that plan. God doesn't need us, but yet he uses us. God's plan will happen. It's just a matter of who of us is going to participate, and how are we going to participate. Last week in the adult Bible classes, we were looking at Jesus as the King. We looked at chapters 14 through 16 of Matthew. And one of the stories that we looked at during that time kind of stuck out to me that kind of falls in line with this idea, and that is Jesus feeding the 5,000. When we see Jesus, the story of him feeding 5,000, we see, people have followed him out to this deserted place. It's starting to get late. His disciples start to get concerned. They approach Jesus, say, hey, these people are going to need to go get something to eat. But Jesus had other plans. He, if being Jesus and the power he has, could have easily snapped his fingers and solved the problem right there. In fact, if I was Jesus, that's probably what I would have done. I would have said, okay, I can solve this, snap my fingers, everybody has a plate of food. Snap my fingers, everybody has a hideaway pizza, we're having a pizza party. But again, God's ways are not our ways, and Jesus had a different response. But Jesus said, they don't need to go away, you give them something to eat. He said, you go feed them. He could have easily done it himself, but he says, no, I want you to go out and feed them. The apostles obeyed, and they were able to go out and feed them. He gave them food. He said, go give them food, and that's what they did. The power wasn't in the apostles. It wasn't in their ability. They just were asked to participate in the miracle that Jesus was performing. Jesus now does the same thing with us. He has a plan, and he calls us to participate in his plan. He calls us to go feed the people, take his word out and feed his people. In the Great Commission, he says, go make disciples, baptizing them in the name of Jesus for the remission of their sins. He doesn't need us to go out and do his work, but he's called us to go out and do it. He's called us to be the vessels that takes his word into the earth. He's called us to be the vessels that go into the world delivering his word. His word that is powerful and it has its own plan. His word, as Isaiah 55 says, is going to fulfill its plan. It's just a matter of who's going to be the vessel that takes it. And so as we looked at this verse up in Colorado, this kind of idea of, okay, well, what am I doing? How am I participating in God's plan? What should I be doing going forward? So that's when I accepted the position of being the coordinator for South Sudan. It's where I'm starting. Now, South Sudan, it's not the first choice of mine. When I was initially said, yeah, I want to be a coordinator for one of the schools, I looked quickly at the list of schools that they have, and they have some nice ones. They have one in Aruba. They have some nice tropical locations. But looking through the list, I saw there was one that had no coordinator assigned to it, and it was South Sudan. So I kind of felt that's probably where I'm going to get put. And that's about right. They quickly said, so what's your experience with international travel? I said, well, I've been to Ethiopia a lot. And then I quickly said, well, I've also been to Central America, Guatemala, Honduras. And they're like, oh, you've been to Ethiopia? That's right next to South Sudan. I'm like, yes, it is. And so knowing how long it takes to get to South Sudan, knowing some things about South Sudan, actually I knew limited there, but what I did know, I was like, it doesn't seem like the place I want to be, but you know what, somebody's got to do it, right? They had a coordinator at one point, and he quickly backed out. As we get into my trip, maybe I can understand a little bit more as to why. It was not an easy place to be, but that's what I'm doing. I've accepted the job as the coordinator for South Sudan. Now, most people don't know where South Sudan is, or that the fact that South Sudan is its own country. Some people, when I tell people I'm coordinating a school in South Sudan, they're thinking I'm talking about a region of Sudan. It's not. It is a separate country. It split away in 2011. Sudan was having a lot of civil war, a lot of conflicts. They still are having a lot of conflicts. And in 2011, South Sudan split away from Sudan and became their own country. So it is now the world's youngest country. It is also the world's poorest country. And a lot of that happens to be because of their youth and how long they've been a country, but there are other factors that obviously go into that. Here is a closer look at the country of South Sudan. In the bottom, there you see in big letters it says Juba. That is the capital city. That is not where the school is currently. Right above that, if you go up the river a little bit, you see a town called Bor. Bor, South Sudan is the place where the school is currently located. Not exactly the greatest name, Bor, kind of sounds boring, but that's where it is. So when I flew into Juba, the capital city, it took a nice little 3-hour drive up that river to get to Bor. Many people, I'll get to that in a second, sorry. If we have students from all over this country coming in, some as far as, if you look in the top left, it's called Awil. We have 4 students, I believe, from Awil. That's like a 14-hour trip to get from Awil to Bor. So these students are coming from long distances to get there. Bor is not an easy place to get to from no matter where you are due to the types of roads that there are in South Sudan. This is an aerial photo of Juba. That is the Nile River that goes along the capital, and it goes throughout the whole country. As you can see on this, that river that's going through, that is the Nile River. So this is kind of an aerial photo of what Juba, the capital city, looks like. Here is a street in Bor, and here is another street in Bor. This is what most of them look like. It's hard to get good pictures and representation of what it is like to be there. You're not supposed to be taking pictures out in public. It's frowned upon. It's not safe. I snuck a few. Usually I'd hold my phone up to my chest and try to do it quickly. That's why my quality of pictures isn't great. I even snuck a few videos, but they're not going to be on the day, showing the night. But this is Bor. Here is the only export that South Sudan has. That is a pile of fish. That's the Nile River in the back. And those fish, they take out of the Nile River. They lay them out on the ground for 3 days in the sun so they can dry out. The same ground that you're walking and kicking up dust, it's all getting on the fish. I don't like fish, so I probably wouldn't have eaten it anyway, but many times they offered me fish. This is one reason I'd never touched it, because it did not look appetizing. But walking through this area, there is actually semi-trucks full of these fish that they send to every country around. They send them to Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Congo. This is their one export. There isn't any other way that they produce anything. I asked, why don't you guys produce your own food? Because that's one thing the school faces problems with. Food prices are expensive because all their food comes from other countries. I asked, why can't you grow your own food? It's because it's too dangerous. People started farms and they get attacked. People kill them. Being outside of the towns, being outside of the cities, it opens you up to people coming in and taking over. So they just aren't able to have farms because it's not safe. And so that made me feel great when I was driving from one town to another, knowing that. So it's a young country, which also means the church there is also young. There wasn't many congregations before it split off to be its own country. There was a few small ones, but prior to 2011, there wasn't much of a church presence in South Sudan. But whenever they became their own country, some missionaries that were living in Gambela, Ethiopia, they were working with a lot of refugees that were coming out of South Sudan. they moved into South Sudan when it became its own country because it suddenly was a little bit more safer to go in. And that's where the first congregations were being started, were being planted. And now you start seeing congregations spread throughout the country, and those pictures are way too dark. Something I'll improve on next time I present. Yeah, there we go. So here are many different congregations, some meeting in buildings, some meeting under trees, different ways that people are worshiping, but the church is growing. People are being baptized by the hundreds, some would even say the thousands. There is a great response to the gospel happening in South Sudan. However, with the churches around being young, this presents a problem. One thing that I discussed with the leadership in country while I was there is the idea of there's a lack of good leadership for these congregations, which is why we need the church, the preaching school. That's why we need strong leaders being developed, being built, so that these people that are being baptized will have good, strong leaders to guide them, to continue to disciple them. And that's one thing these churches are struggling to have. There's many churches that have little to no leadership in them. But yet, they said that we can go out and baptize people all day. There's people desiring to follow Jesus, but they just don't have the number of people there to guide them. And so that's one of the focuses we're going to be having as we train preachers is not only do we just train them and send them out, but how can we help develop them as good leaders? How can we continue to help strengthen the congregations that they are going out and preaching at? All right, so now let's get on to the school in Bor. This is the current building in Bor, South Sudan. That's the main building that they meet and have classes at. These are the lodging facilities where the students stay. This is inside of one of those lodging facilities. Each one of these buildings has 4 beds in them. And of course, you have to have your mosquito net so you don't get eaten up by mosquitoes at night. These are the current students. There are 12 of them. And then 2 cooks. Those are the 2 ladies in there. Those are the cooks. Here's a picture of the students with me and the other guy in there. He, if you don't recognize him, his name is Keith Kasargent. He is the director of all international schools for Bear Valley. He taught one of our summer series lessons here this summer. He went with me. He'd never been to South Sudan, even though he'd helped get it kind of started. And he's been overseeing it since it didn't have a coordinator. So this was his first chance to be in the country visiting the school. And while we were there, he was actually teaching one of the classes on church leadership. And so those are the current students. And I realized actually there's only 10 in that picture. I think 2 of them got cut off. I apologize to them, but they're not here. All right. On the weekends, this is a picture of one of the students preaching. And if you could see that picture better, you'd see that these people are wearing a uniform. This is something that they've kind of hit on the last couple of months is there's a primary school near the school, like a local primary school, that they have been asked to come in and start teaching on the weekends. So they go in on the weekends and they preach. And they teach these students about God, about Jesus, and they have been able to baptize a lot of them. And we'll actually get a little bit more into that. So that's when they're not in class, they're encouraged to get out into the community, evangelize, start practicing what you're learning, start, reaching people. All right, so this is Jacob. He is the in-country director. So this is the guy that I talk with on a weekly basis. He's the one that's handling the day-to-day activities in South Sudan. He been there. He grew up in South Sudan. He attended one of the Bear Valley schools in Tanzania back in about 2017. He and 2 other guys left South Sudan for 2 years, trained in Tanzania at Bear Valley's preaching school, and then returned back to South Sudan. Upon returning to South Sudan, he realized okay, I need to start working with congregations. He planted a couple of congregations, was trying to grow them, and realized we need more leadership. So he contacted Bear Valley and said, we need to do a school in South Sudan. Many people started seeing how much he had learned while he was in Tanzania, and they also wanted to go to school. And so Bear Valley said, okay, if you can get enough students, we will get something started. So he's the one that started the school last year in South Sudan. A little bit more about Jacob. He has 2 kids. However, he has 15 mouths to feed in his home. His brother was shot and killed a couple of years ago, and so he had to take in his brother's family, his brother's wife, his brother's kids. He also has taken in his aunts and uncles, and there were some other people there living. I don't know how they all fit into his family, but he's feeding 15 mouths, so he's taken on a lot. And so on top of coordinating, on top of being the director of the school, he works for a telecommunication company there in South Sudan. He also has started his own marketing business. He's also opened a hair salon for his wife and nieces to work in. So this guy does a lot. And it was very good to spend a lot of time. Me and Jacob got to spend a lot of time together since we didn't want to sit in class all day. We would get out, go visit people, visit different areas of South Sudan. And so he's the man in the country that is keeping the show going, doing the hard work, while I sit back here and just kind of help give him direction. All right. So let's get to my trip now that we're running out of time. So I arrived in South Sudan on a Monday morning, early Monday morning. I met Keith in Uganda. Me and Keith joined together in Uganda, and we flew over to South Sudan. Immediately, first thing you do when you get to a new country, you need to get money so you can spend money. Things cost. You have US dollars. A lot of people won't take it. No one takes credit cards, so what do? You get money. That's me with my money. That right there is $100 worth of South Sudan pounds. So when you're paying cash for everything, this is what you have to carry around with you to pay. Makes it a little difficult. You don't want to be seen with a lot of money, but yet you have to have money to eat. And so, yeah, we had to find clever ways to disguise the fact we're carrying around what's right there is 1 million pounds worth of money. In fact, that green bag actually has 2 more stacks the same size. So we were a little nervous carrying around that much cash, but there it is. That's what yeah. This is the road to Bor. So we flew into Juba, we drove to Bor. It's a 3-hour drive. That's what you want to do after flying for 40 hours is sit in the back of a car for 3 more hours. And yes, as tall as I am, I had to sit in the back of the car because the windows were tinted, and they said it's not safe to sit in the front where people can see you. So sat in the back. This is what we had to drive through most of the way. This was pretty much every 5 miles you'd have cows like this in your way. So it was a long journey, it took 3 hours. And then when we arrive, here's our hotel. This is called the Modern Hotel. Not very modern, but that's what they call it. This is what my hotel room that I so lovingly called my prison cell. It actually looks nicer in the pictures than it was in person. I actually did not show the bathroom because it was a little too gross for pictures. South Sudan is hot. Most days was 100 degrees, and there's not much air conditioning. In fact, my room had no air conditioning. Keith, his room did have air conditioning. Just kind of the luck of the draw. Luckily, though, I got to pay a little bit less for my room. Keith had to pay $15 a day. I paid $12 a day, so that $3 I saved was not worth it. As things go in Africa, when you have plans never go as they should. We had a driver drive us in a car down to up to Bor, so we got to spend 3 hours in a car. When we got there, he asked to be paid. Obviously, he just spent a lot of gas to get there. So we gave him his money, and then he disappeared. And so we had no transportation the rest of the week. And so this is how we had to get around. These are called bodas. It's basically a motorcycle that you pile on the back of. Jacob and Keith shared one because they were a little bit smaller than I am. I guess I'm big enough I got my own motorcycle. But yeah, so we had to either walk everywhere we were going or pay a motorcycle to drive us around, which was kind of surprising because up until this point, Jacob kept telling me how dangerous it is for motorcycles and how you shouldn't ride them because they're not very safe, and here we are riding motorcycles. All right, so every day that I was there, the students would get together. Keith would be teaching them a class. This is the hotel's conference room that we rented out because they had electricity that we could use. We had to pay for the electricity, otherwise they wouldn't turn it on during the day. We had to pay extra for that. They kept only the electricity on from 7 o'clock at night till 5 in the morning. So that way people could run their air conditioners if they had them in the room. Which Keith actually mentioned to me, yeah, every morning at 5 a.m. I wake up when that air conditioner shuts off. And I'd like, yes, every morning at 5 a.m. I've been up for 3 hours because it's so hot, and I hear your air conditioner shut off because it's right outside my room. I don't think he thought that was as funny as I did. But yeah, so the students spent every day learning. They'd spend the morning session and they'd break for lunch, come back in the afternoon. So a week-long class on church leadership. Keith taught while I went out with Jacob. Going forward, when I'm there by myself, I'll be the one teaching the class while I'm there. So when we would go out, Jacob would take me to different places, meet different people, reach out to different Christians, different people that he wants to teach further, help encourage. One trip that we made was to the Campus Church of Christ here. This is a Christian vocational school. They would bring in kids, teach them a vocation, whether it be technology, sewing, electronics. It was a way to teach these kids how to find work whenever they became adults. That's one thing I skipped over on my notes, but 90% of the youth, 30 years and younger, don't work. They don't have jobs. They can't find jobs. They're not trained for work, which leads to the poverty that the country is in. And 70% of the country is under the age of 30. It's a young country. There's not a lot of old people there. The majority of the country are young people, and they aren't able to find work. So that's what this school is attempting to do, is trying to teach them so that they can go find jobs and change that narrative. But it's held here at a Church of Christ, and so they stay there on the campus. Sundays they attend the worship services there. The guy that I'm standing with there, his name is Chul. He was one of the 3 that went to Tanzania to the Bible college there, the Bible school, and this is the work he does now. He's the director of this school. Many people ask me about the food. What did you eat there? Especially those that know how picky of an eater I am. I lost 13 pounds while I'm there. That should tell you what I think about the food. I did take a picture of my very favorite meal while I was in country. It's snacks that I brought from home. Got 2 beef sticks, some granola bar, and some granola. That was my favorite meal. But here are some of the pictures of the other food that I ate. The meat was fine, but that green stuff, it's kind of like a broccoli stew that has the texture of snot. Yeah, it was great. So yeah, I did lose 13 pounds. Tim mentioned last week, he wants to be skinny and lose weight, but he doesn't want to put in the effort to do it. If you go to South Sudan, you can do it. Wednesday, while I was in the country, I got this email. Travel advisory, do not travel to South Sudan. That's comforting when you're there. It says, do not travel to South Sudan due to unrest, crime, kidnapping, landmines, and health threats. And then down farther on the email it says, for U.S. citizens that are in South Sudan, do not travel to South Sudan for any reason. That's comforting to know. And it said also, avoid locations where there are landmines. If I knew there were landmines, I definitely would avoid them. I thought that was very nice of our state government to do. All right. So that's actually not yet. Thursday was an eventful day when we were there. Everything had been going smoothly. Got that email, so I was a little on edge coming into Thursday. Come into lunch, from lunch on Thursday into the class, and suddenly two guys that we had no idea who they were showed up, yelling at us in some language we didn't understand. English is their official language, but that's not what they were speaking, and they were upset with something. Finally, we were able to get them to leave the room. We locked them out and quickly called up Jacob to say, hey, can you get here? There's some issues. Turns out they were government people. I'd say officials, but they were wearing street clothes, so it's hard to tell. But they were with the government. They had heard from people in the surrounding our hotel that we were there and that we were holding secret meetings. Apparently there's a law that if you have a meeting of 5 or more people in a public area, which apparently the hotel room is a public area, you have to get permission. And our hotel was supposed to do that for us, and they did not. So they thought we were trying to have a political uprising. That is what they thought we were doing. They didn't care that we were preaching, teaching God, teaching the Bible. They were worried that we were trying to overthrow the government. Once Jacob went down to their offices to try to explain that, they were going to arrest him and put him in jail. Thankfully, somebody that I had met that morning and that Jacob had introduced me to was a local politician. He was able to show up and kind of smooth things over and get Jacob out, prevent him from being arrested. One interesting thing about that guy, that politician that helped us out, I met with him earlier that morning with Jacob. He identified himself as a fellow Christian. Later, Jacob would explain to me he hadn't been to church in a couple years, so it's like, he's like, I don't know, we're struggling, trying to get him to come back, trying to get him to understand some things. And during our time meeting, we had some discussions about some stuff that he struggled with, and one thing he did not understand is why he was not allowed to have 4 wives. He said, King Solomon had many wives, why can't I have 4? And so we studied with him a little bit that morning, tried to get him to understand, just because Solomon did something doesn't mean we can do it. Just because you read about something in the Bible does not mean it was right. But we didn't get very far with him on that. Jacob's going to follow up with him, but that was kind of his thing. He's like, I should be able to have 4 wives. Makes me wonder if he already had 4 wives, because that number seemed to stick out to him. But that is somebody that we had met with that morning. He was able to turn around and help us out that afternoon. So Thursday was an eventful day. Friday, we finished up the classes, traveled back up to Juba so Keith could leave. And then over the weekend, me and Jacob spent the weekend looking for places in Juba to move the school. We are working on trying to get the school moved to Juba. It's going to help logistically with getting students in. It's going to help financially. It's a lot cheaper to do things in the capital than it is in Bor. It's a lot safer, and it's a lot easier to get there whenever I'm traveling. I'm selfishly wanting to be in Juba so I don't have to drive 3 hours once I do land. But me and Jacob scouted out some different locations over the weekend. We were able to actually find something, and so this month, Jacob's going to start the process of moving everything from Bor to Juba. So starting next year, the students will be in Juba going forward. So it's one of the things we were able to get done while we were in the country. Saturday, after we had visited some places, I was being dropped off at my hotel. Jacob informed me, by the way, you're preaching in the morning. Which, being a seasoned preacher that I am, thought, okay, that's no problem. I asked him, how long do you want me to preach? He said, 30 minutes. After that, no one's listening. I said, great, because that's all I could do is 30 minutes. So being the fact I was up every morning from 2 a.m. on, I had plenty of time to prepare. So 3 a.m. comes around, I'm awake, preparing my lesson, got a 30-minute lesson ready, go out to get in the car to go to church and see Jacob sitting on a motorcycle and realize, oh, we don't have a car anymore. So drove 30 minutes, wind blowing in my face, dust all over my face, to church to preach through the city of Juba, which is not fun on the back of a motorcycle, to get to church, only to realize that they have an interpreter for me. They speak English, but yet they're going to have services in English and in their local Dinka language. So suddenly my 30-minute lesson needed to be cut in half. So I kind of adjusted on the fly. Church services went fine, I guess. No one complained. But while I was here preaching in Juba, the students were continuing their studies with the primary school in Bor, and were obviously having a much better time than I was because they baptized 36 people that day. So again, this goes to the idea that, baptizing people is not a problem. They're going to be able to baptize people. People are ready to follow Jesus. It's just a matter of having the strong leadership that is needed. So the future plans for the school. Like I said, we're moving it to Juba. This is going to help us attract more students. We're actually having some students from northern Uganda that want to come for the next session. The current students still have one more year of school. They do 2 years total. And they just wrapped up their first year. They've now traveled back to their towns. They will start back up in February. They are in school for 2 4-month periods, so 8 months total out of the year. So they have one more year. After that, we'll bring in a new group of students. We're going to be able to, due to the location of the capital city, bring some in from northern Uganda. We also would like to expand into more schools if we can find the students for it, and if we can find the funding for it. And selfishly, I told Keith, I don't want to limit ourselves to just to South Sudan. There's already one school in Uganda, but it's far away. We have northern Uganda. We have Ethiopia nearby. Ethiopia currently has no schools, but yet there are some Ethiopian students that would like to come to our school. They just can't afford to do so. So the future is that we can have a lot more schools in this area, a lot more work to be done, a lot more leaders to train. There's a lot of hurdles to get to that point, but that's what our hope is. We see the church growing, and it's in dire need of new leadership. So that's what our future plan is, and that wrapped up my trip. It was a lot harder than I expected, but it was much needed. It was great that we were able to be there in the country. We were able to solve a lot of issues that we were not even aware existed. We were able to see them firsthand, make some adjustments. We solved a lot of financial issues that they were seeing, and hopefully going forward, the school will be much better, run a lot smoother, and it will transition into more growth and more souls being saved. That kind of wraps up, I think. Yep, that's the end of my slides. I didn't spend a lot of time, spent most of the time talking about what we're doing in South Sudan, but as I said at the beginning, God has a plan. God's plan is working. It's people that say the church is dying, many people have said as it was said in Colorado many times when I was up there, anybody that says the church is dying hasn't been out of the country. It may be struggling here in the United States, but all over the world, the church is growing, and it's growing fast. God's word is going out into the world. It's up to us to be the ones taking it out there. There are many here that probably themselves have not obeyed the gospel. God's word is out there. It's alive. It's active. God has a plan. It's just a matter of, are you willing to participate in the plan? Are you willing to obey God's commands? Are you willing to submit to him? And if you are here and that you haven't done that yet and you'd like to, or if you need prayers or if you need anything else, you can come forward as we stand and sing.